All right, we're going to call the Finance Committee meeting to order. That's 7:16. Here.
Here.
All right, so today we have 4 action items and then 1 item for discussion. So we'll start with our first action item is a review of the minutes. Were there any questions about the minutes from anybody from our last meeting? The riveting Finance Committee minutes? The Finance Committee recommends that the minutes of February 3rd, 2019 Finance Committee be approved as presented.
Second.
Yes?
Yes. Yes.
And from that last meeting, there was the Camp Timberley, there was a shift in that, and we were all a part of that. And that's been executed and is out. Action item number 2, security cameras. Joe's here with us today. So thank you for sharing the 18-page RFP for the cameras. And got to see all the maps. So what should we know about the cameras?
All right, so I'll just start with a little bit of brief history of the cameras and what we have now, and then what we were doing to rectify that.
Awesome.
So right now we're running a 12-year-old system. Right now it's called Nuvoco system, and these cameras are all analog. They run coax cable, which is hard to push through buildings, push through ceilings and walls and things like that. The cameras also have poor quality as far as video. They do not have a network managed system where one person can actually see cameras throughout the whole district. You have to go into each individual school to actually see video, or if you want to see any kind of recorded video. The video and audio analytics on these cameras are really poor as far as what they call hotspots, like if you want to concentrate on a certain exit area, where you can actually say, okay, watch this exit area for a certain amount of days or hours. It doesn't do that. You just pretty much have to go through all the video and all the process of all that. So what we're doing is looking for a camera that's kind of network-based, where we can see all the cameras throughout the district, so we could have like a command center and see everything out there. Also, one that actually works with that the law enforcement has helped us. Actually, EPD has actually helped us go through the buildings, do a walkthrough and see where cameras are needed, and actually picked out the areas outside our buildings that are we should put cameras in. So you said you saw some of the maps.
Yeah, I looked at the maps.
Okay, and I'll just
One of my questions from the maps is some of the schools have, so in the RFP, one of the commitments is there was a bullet on high volume areas like lunchrooms and cafeterias, right?
Yes.
Or lunchrooms, gymnasiums, auditoriums. Some of the schools have that highlighted that are going to get cameras and some don't. How did you decide which buildings would or would not?
It was just pretty much as far as, you mean the new system or the old system?
The new system.
This new system, it just depended on the traffic or the principal. We also talked to the principal, says, where do you think you need some of these cameras? Are they needed here or not? So we kind of got their guidance too. But if you look at the map, what we did is each vendor that was bidding on the project that actually got these maps, and it shows what we thought green is inside and blue is outside, the coverage that are needed in these buildings. So, mostly the hallways, stairways, traffic areas, gymnasium.
Doorways.
Yeah, all that stuff. Every outside door is covered.
No bathrooms, no instructional
No.
areas really.
No,
Okay.
that's, one thing that we didn't do that with the past cameras. We're not doing that
Right.
with now. So once the bid was out, there was a walkthrough with all of our vendors. They came in, went through the schools. So they got a feel of what they're working with as far as where the cameras are going to go. Because, there's a lot of blind spots in these buildings that you can't see, and cameras need to be put. And we told them what we needed as far as a managed system, something that we could actually take a clip and actually send it to law enforcement. So We don't have to have law enforcement come to our buildings, download the video, which takes many hours. We can just clip it. We can actually set an expiration date on it or expiration time. Say, hey, if you don't look at this by tomorrow by 5 o'clock, it expires. You can't get to it anymore. So it keeps it private. There was 3 vendors that came in. One was DriftNet, one was AT&T, one was Great Line. We chose Great Line a couple of reasons. One, of course, was the cost. They use Hanwha cameras, which Hanwha doesn't require you to have a yearly license fee for your cameras. AT&T and DriftNet do, and that's what gets the price really high. There's a one-time fee when you first buy the camera, and then 5 years after that, then you renew your fees. So even with that, they came under, way under all the other ones. They came out at almost $544,000 for all of our schools.
Right.
And the other ones were a little bit over $1.2 million, and the other one's 2.3. So.
And then had a higher annual cost.
Correct.
After
All
that.
the other 2 did, yes. One thing you should know about this is just equipment costs. It does not include any of our labor that's going to cost to actually put up the cameras. But we have internal folks that do that, and we could save much more money doing it that way. Plus, they know our buildings. They know where the runs are. They don't have to look for them.
Is that your team that does that?
Yes, it's
Okay.
one of our guys in our team, and then there's another vendor that helps out if needed.
Great.
So I can answer any questions if anybody has any.
I just want to clarify in the 3rd bullet point here in the memo that it says that there's going to be coverage of the gymnasiums, that
Correct.
those cameras will be off during the school day. According to the collective bargaining agreement, that cameras in teaching areas used by members in the evening, but such as the gym or auditorium, those cameras will be turned off during
Turned
the
off
school
dur-
day. So is that the shared understanding?
The reason we picked some of those areas is because that's where a lot of students get together and some problems can occur.
I understand that we have language specifically related to security videos, cameras. that
Okay.
We want to make sure that we are following the language as well as following whatever you need ensuring safety.
And that's one great thing about the system is we can turn off any camera that we want at any time, and that's set the time to it. It doesn't have to be done physically every day. We just set, okay.
We can
turn
ensure
it on,
not,
turn
we
it
can
on.
ensure not to use footage during instructional periods at any time in a manner that would be judgmental or evaluative, though. But a lot of the gyms are used for indoor recess and things like that.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say, what does that do for schools that have
that use
no separate
multi-purpose.
cafeteria and gym? Is there a way to time it so that you have it for lunch but not for PE?
Yes, we can set times to those. Plus, there's a lot of after-school activities that happen in these buildings too.
It sounds like that's something that can be done that needs to be discussed.
Yeah.
Correct.
Sure,
Figure it
that's
out.
no problem.
Awesome.
Yep, it's all automated.
I also just want to highlight that I saw in the memo that you've identified a grant that can maybe cover a significant amount of the cost to upgrade this. So I think that's
Yes.
fantastic and want to thank.
Yeah, we actually had our first meeting with that, and I think there's another one coming up, so we're getting all the information for that to submit the grant.
And then we have another meeting scheduled for next
Yep.
week where we'll keep working on that.
Thank you.
Logistics, actual function, how do people view the footage? Is it app-based? Do they need a separate display? Can they do it on their phone?
You can do it on a mobile app, you can do it on your Mac, you can do it on a PC. What's nice about it is there's controls that from, command center, we can actually just give principals access to it. And, we can filter that down to assistant principals. We can get filtered down to certain times you can look at the video. It just depends on the way we want it structured or the school district wants to structure it.
Does this tap in and be in addition to cameras that we currently have, or does it replace all
It
existing cameras?
replaces all the cameras.
Including doorways and stuff that we have? now?
Correct.
Okay.
We can't even get parts for the old cameras anymore.
Got
We
it.
can't even get the DVRs that actually record the video anymore.
Can we get parts for these cameras?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. For the new ones. Oh, of course, yes, for many years.
So when you say the footage can be viewed on the app, do you mean real time or?
Yes. It could be real time or.
And how far back can you go?
I'm sorry?
How far back can you go?
It depends on the main server, which is going to be a healthy server. Yeah, I think you could go up to 30 days.
Great.
And those, of course, will be strict, who has access to those apps and who has. Even if you have the app and you're not allowed to get into it, you won't be able to get into it.
And I think I see too that it's a 3-year phased installation.
Correct.
Plan. So so obviously the schools starting next year that are getting the new ones will get that up and running as quickly as possible. And then the other schools will just maintain the old system. The new cameras are.
Well, one nice thing is that with the old system, we can take parts from the ones that were taken out from the other ones, and if they go down, we can replace those other cameras and those DVRs if needed.
Oh, with this big.
With the ones that were taken out, yeah.
Okay.
And part of the reason why we phased it out over 3 years, even though we have the funds in the tort fund to pay for, we wanted to make sure that we have the capacity to be able to supervise and to be able to make sure they're done well instead of doing too many too quickly and not having the bandwidth to be able to do the supervision necessary to make sure everything is done well.
Yeah, our first phase, we plan to be done by mid-August. If everything gets approved, then we can start right away.
Any other questions?
Is it operate on an outside server, so it's not on our server?
It'll actually be maintained in our data server, our data center. It's just one server that all the cameras will go back to. We have the bandwidth between the buildings that we can do that.
I don't know if it's ever been the case that like our server goes down. How will that be managed?
There's redundancy, so like if a hard drive goes down on a server, another one will pick up, or an external one will pick up also.
Are they virtually backed up?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Joe, can you clarify again when this work is going to be done? You said,
So the first phase
Yeah.
will be done by our plan is mid-August.
and when's it starting? Like how long?
It's going to start as soon as I think this goes to board in 2 weeks. And as soon as that approved,
You can place the order right after that's
yes.
done. And about how long does it take to get the supplies?
The supplies can come in within a couple weeks.
Okay.
They are made in China though, so,
So,
but we already looked into that.
So
We're
were
good.
the other ones.
What's that?
So were the other ones.
Yeah,
on the
that's
other
true.
bids,
Yeah.
too.
are things being shipped from China right now?
Are there any other questions about the cameras? This is a big project.
It is. It is. But it's
it's
well
needed.
overdue.
And I think we communicated briefly, there are unknowns, I think, financially here in terms of, there's been a lot of just situations where having visibility of some spaces would have been very helpful. That has taken a lot of, not just money or legal costs, but time in terms of administrative energy and teacher energy and trying to figure out what happened in certain situations that this will, this is not intended to be evaluative, this is not to be a big brother or a watchdog, this is to provide better safety and security to the buildings inside and out. So
And on top of that, it's also, we can give access to Evanston Police Department as far as the cameras also. If they
how do
need-
they get access?
We have to just give them either the app and then there's a special user ID password they need to get in.
I guess similar to when there's a situation in the school, we have to call the police and invite them into the building. Do they have ready access to cameras, or do they have to be invited in? Do we have to give them access each time we want them to
The
view it?
existing ones right now?
No, the future
No,
ones.
the future ones, no, they'll be able to actually, let's say if there's something going on in a building and they're outside the building, they can actually see all the cameras within that building.
So in a crisis situation,
Yes.
they're ready able to.
Yep,
do
that was one of our big things.
Do the cameras have audio?
They do.
So, God forbid, a gun goes off in a hallway, what happens?
It has that gun detection kind of analytic
So
that
it triggers that
Yep.
one to be,
it'll give us an alert.
okay.
So just to clarify though, police only has access if we give.
If we give them.
For the time frame that we give it to them.
Correct.
It's not an ongoing.
No,
They don't have
not at all.
automatic access. What it is in case of an emergency, God forbid there's an incident in one of our schools, we have the ability to be able to give them access in real time so it can help the investigation, evacuation, safety.
I think we may, I don't know how other board members feel, I think we may want some more clarity procedurally on that.
Okay.
Because just like firemen and policemen have access to our buildings all the time, we trust that they'll only use that access when necessary. this is a different, this isn't coming into the building physically, so it's a virtual relationship. I'm curious to know how procedurally you can turn it off and back on, or how that will work to ensure that there's like a code of conduct in the use of the video.
What we will do, we'll develop an MOU that lays out what the responsibilities are, what the expectations are.
Or how they can use it.
Yes,
Right.
yes. So,
In our conversations with, for example, EPD or the fire department, what I've seen is that it happens when there's an incident that requires access, and we would be a part of then at that point. But again, I would totally agree with what Raphael said, that this would be part of the MOU, an agreement, but really it's planning for a situation when we enter into a situation where we're doing unified command or we're working through a situation to understand. It's not something that we just give universal access in advance of it.
Right, but I think an MOU of some kind makes sense to try to work through that.
Yeah, I think given the newness of the technology, there could be a concern of being surveilled, or of children being surveilled, or interactions between parents and their children, et cetera. And it behooves of us to have clear information about that.
Like if the police are going to use our technology to surveil of some kind, it has to be with our permission, right?
They shouldn't be
Yeah.
solving crimes.
So that if they have the app, they would have to get some kind of permission to access the cameras through that app. It's not just they can open the app and say, I want to look at the hallway at shoot, and then they can.
And those permissions expire also. We can just give them access for a couple hours and it's done. They will be able to get back in again.
Okay. So yeah, I think just knowing that there's clear communication and agreement on that, and so that we're clear what the terms are too.
So before we go live with the system, some kind of steps and
Yeah, I mean, we do intergovernmental agreements for other things like this, right?
we do. We have MOUs for, even the recording that is taking place right now.
Right now. Right.
So we'll develop something similar.
Awesome.
And then I just wanted to clarify too, the comments about the cameras being made in China. That was in relation to the fact that factories are not up and running,
there's a lot.
perhaps, for those cameras to be prepared, not a slight
No,
at
of course.
technology that's happening in China. Just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so the final date, back to your question, for the final sign-off and review is scheduled for August 7th, right now.
Thank you.
And the expected completion of the project is July 31st. Just for that first wave.
Anything else?
Awesome. So the Finance Committee recommends that the proposed plan for District 65 security camera system replacement be presented to the full board for approval.
Second. Hilton?
Yes.
Franca? Yes. Tanya Rudy?
Yes.
And if you have any more questions, just don't hesitate to email me or call me.
Thank you. Good job. All right, so the building use fees is our next action item. You shared a schedule with us of building use fees and our vendors who use it over the summer and throughout the year.
And these fees are presented to you annually. For increase this year, we are proposing a 2.3% increase, which is the CPI for the 2019. We collect approximately $40,000 in rental fees. And we added in the schedule, on this table, we actually added a fifth group. That's what's new this year. It's really not a new group, but we were trying, we charge for summer camps a little bit differently because a lot of the camps use multiple rooms at the same time. They use a field, they use outdoor area, so we can't really use our regular schedule, otherwise the cost of camp would be, prohibitive. So we came up with slightly different schedule for them.
Have you gotten feedback from any of these groups about any of the fee schedules or?
Not Not yet, but we did have conversations with some, and we did send them, I think, Don, our Buildings and Ground Director, sent them an email telling them that the fees will be changing this year.
By 2.3%.
Yes, and in some instances, actually, we found out that, some of the organizations were, they were not following our schedule, so we just want to put everyone on the same schedule and have them follow the same procedures.
A question about Group 5. You have here that summer camps go to August 31st. Teachers return on the 20th.
We just put a date there, but
It also starts June
Yes.
1st, and school's still in session.
Okay, I just want to clarify that
yeah,
we're
I
having
know
dates.
that's not, we
Accuracy.
just wanted, and because it's not next fiscal year, we just want to basically emphasize that they start in this fiscal year, but you're absolutely right,
This schedule is not when the contracts with the rentals takes place. The rental dates are on the contracts individually.
If I can just explain that, the latest we have out of camp goes August 9th. So when a request comes in for someone to use their camp, we look at the dates that they're requesting, we look at the fact that we need to get the building clean, and teachers need to come in and set up their classroom. So even if the contract says that, we make sure we have enough time to be able to set up. So we don't give anyone the permission to can't be that.
Yeah, and the summer use schedule that's in the agenda.
yeah, there's actually preliminary schedule.
Has the actual dates for the different camps.
Can I just ask, how much notice were they given about the change? Was it before they had their registrations and they could change fees, or was it after, was it more recent?
There was, I think it was a good month, I
Yeah.
think.
Before,
They even start billing and posting
Before the
information.
camps are soliciting
Correct.
folks with fees, okay.
Correct.
I was like, a month from now, they
No,
they registered months ago, but yeah, okay.
And these-
Well, they had time to adjust their
Yeah,
fees if they
absolutely,
wanted to.
yes.
And this group schedule, it basically acknowledges that people that are working with our kids in our buildings during normal Monday through Friday times when we already have staff working, don't really pay a fee to use the facility, like PTOs and certain
Yes.
recreation groups.
Yes.
And that's just the partnership that we have.
That's why we only have very few groups that pay. Most of the groups that use our buildings get the space for free.
So thanks, Sumi, for pointing out those dates. I do notice that there's one that goes till 8/21, and it's scheduled from 8 to 5, so I'm just curious how that's going to work when we have students coming back. Kingsley?
we try to work around them to make sure that we are able to get the building ready for teachers.
So, but it's, okay.
One classroom and outdoor space.
And it's a bike camp.
Yeah.
So I know that we've had challenges in the past of camps running up to the end, building maintenance, having challenges of being able to get the schools ready in time. So this has been something that has annually coming up. I am noticing that there is a date that is overlapping with our educators' return. Buildings are supposed to be ready for classroom educators to get in 5 days before, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that would be August 13th.
Right.
So I'm just curious, how are we going to ensure where that classroom space is, that educators have the capability to get into their space? And I know that this is about building use fees, but if we are signing agreements with dates on them that are in conflict, I think that's something that we need to look at.
I appreciate your feedback on that. What we've tried to do is balance the need to make sure that during the summer our kids get into activity instead of sitting at home watching TV, and also making sure that we get our buildings ready for educators to come in and be able to set up their classroom. We've managed, except for I think 2 years ago when we were doing some construction on the flooring where there was delay with the parts to complete the flooring. We've managed to try to make sure that the camp doesn't really get in the way of our educators being able to do that. So for the one classroom that will be needed for that bike, most of the activities that take place with that particular group is actually outdoors. They ride bicycle outside. And if there are needs for them to come in, most of the time they go in the gym. So I think we're capable of making sure that nothing they do get in the way of making sure educators have their classrooms ready for the start of school.
I guess the question would be if it's a bike camp, and it's raining that week, and they go into the gym, do they have stands for the bikes? Or are they on a polished floor? It might be good to revisit with the camp if they intend, if these dates are, because they're all over the Chicagoland area, maybe these dates are specific to other districts that start later than us, right? That might be based off a contract that they do with CPS that starts later, and they may not need that.
We'll work with them to make sure they don't get in the way of what is going on in the building. We've always done that.
So is that gonna be revisited for all of the dates that are ending beyond August 13th?
I don't think
That's
there's
the only
any-
one.
I think that was the only one, right?
There was another one that I saw that said 8/16, I think. But, let me,
Otherwise, 8/7 seems to be, I think, no, 8/10.
The YMCA is 810.
okay. Okay, yeah, I think I saw 7/16, not 8/16, so it would just be the 8/21.
We'll work to make sure it doesn't get in the way of getting the buildings ready.
Thank you.
And copies of the contracts or the schedules get sent to buildings so that principals
Yes.
can communicate with their
Yes.
staff
Yes, we do.
what's being used and where.
Why do we only list after school? We also have programs before school.
In the fee schedule?
Group 2, yeah. And separately, I'm curious if we collect agreements for those group 2s, like a sort of memorandum of understanding for the services provided, and hopefully what our district has to gain from having them in our buildings.
Like the group twos still have to provide insurance,
They still do.
and they still have to do an
provide
agreement.
insurance. Yes.
Right.
And the reason why there's no charge is, you asking why there's no charge?
No, that they're not listed, so it lists only Monday through Friday after school until 9 p.m. We do also have group 2 before school.
And I guess part of that is that head custodians start work at 5:30. So there's really no charge. There's a custodian there already. So we don't charge if we're going to have someone in the building already, and there's no added cost to having the our employee there in the building. We don't charge, and they service our kids, and they don't charge our kids. So we provide that as a service.
Right. But it's just, this, to me, just reading it would insinuate that there's only after school to 9 p.m. offerings for group 2. So just in recognition of the groups that do come in before school, I think that there would be a value to have that listed as well.
Okay.
Because we do also work with groups before school.
Yes, we do. Will do.
Yeah.
Make sure.
And, it's just, it's adjustment for those agreements. I recently asked for those agreements. I think it would be, in the district's interest to ensure, again, that we're meeting, that this is an opportunity for collaborative effort. So we're giving this to you, one, because it's a benefit to our school district, but how? Right, so I haven't seen those agreements, but my hope is that anybody that we're welcoming into the district, we have a mutual benefit, and that's listed somewhere, and that we're honoring those benefits from those organizations that are coming and providing services. Because it makes me think of our most recent joint meeting about literacy, right? So how do we track all of our literacy initiatives that are taking place in our schools that are not being delivered by our professionals? So as we're recruiting for volunteers, or just giving a thorough picture of what
initiatives are being offered at our schools. I think just having that built into some sort of strategic agreement going forward for those partners.
Any other questions about the building use fees? So the Finance Committee recommends that the proposed building use fees for fiscal year 21 and 2020 summer camps be presented to the full board for approval as amended.
What was the amendment?
That, well, we have to change
Oh, to add the before school.
the before school piece.
Second.
Tanya Moody,
Yes.
Bertha,
Yes.
Hilpern,
Yes. And the award for auditing services. Did we put out this bid?
So this is the final action item of tonight. So our contract with RSM, our external auditor, expired in 2019. We did issue a request for proposal, RFP, in December. We sent it to 29 companies. We received 4 bids from Baker Tilly, Lorabeck, and Amen, Mueller Financials, and Miller Cooper. And we interviewed 3 companies because one company was only like a one or two person company. They are all excellent companies, and we looked at their qualifications, but price, which is not the most important factor in this case, and expertise, and also fit for our district. We were looking, for example, for their experience with ERP systems, financial HR systems, because we're looking currently at those systems, and we chose Baker Tilly. We feel very strongly about our choice. We will be saving approximately $8,000 a year. Actually, these prices are almost exactly as our prices from 2014 for audit services. It's a reputable firm. They work with a number of school districts in Illinois, including CPS, District 97, so we recommending signing a contract with Baker Tilly for next 3 years.
Any questions? Thank you. This is not the first time we've heard that this was happening, so. The Finance Committee recommends the award of the audit services to contract to Baker Tilly, Birchow Kraus, be presented to the full board for approval.
Second.
Tanya Moody,
Yes.
Bertha,
Yes.
Hilpern,
Yes. And our discussion item is the budget update. So our ongoing conversation about the knowns and unknowns of state finances and local finances.
Good. To kick this off tonight, we're going to do a follow-up from our last finance meeting and provide an overview tonight and some targets we're trying to meet as far as the financial part of that as well. And we'll also give you an example of how this could work. And then we're looking at the May finance meeting of now getting down, instead of at 30,000 feet, we'll be on the ground with specific areas to look at as well with that. So I think Kathy's going to kick it off, and then Raphael will take it from there.
So at the last finance meeting, we looked at the updated financial projections, and even though we have 2 years with balanced budgets until FY23, we are being proactive, and we're thinking of ways to reduce our future deficits. There was a question from the board at the last meeting and ask to quantify the structural deficit, because right now the rate of increase in our revenues is about 1.5%, and it's pretty much flat, about 1.5%. If you look at the expenditures, it's close to 4%. It's primarily because of cost of staffing. So to bring the rate of expenditures down it's about 1.4 million in expenditures. If you adjust for one-time items, that's how much we would have to reduce from our budget. And frankly, now with the coronavirus situation, we are already revising some of the assumptions we have in projections. I'll give you one example, investment income. So we knew that the interest will not be static, right? The economy is changing constantly, but I think no one foresaw interest rates dropping 0.75% in 1 week, and we just heard that there will be another meeting in upcoming week, I think, to cut even more. So we already slashing the forecast for investment income by approximately 600,000 starting with next year. There is more and more talk right now about recession that may affect corporate personal property replacement tax, which is the tax our businesses pay to the state of Illinois. Who knows how it will affect the CPI and property taxes in the future. But to reduce...
Just to give you an idea, concrete idea of what we're talking about. Today, at the end of the close of the market, 10-year Treasury bill is now 50 basis points. About a month ago, 10-year Treasury bill was closer to 2%. Now we are looking at 0.50 for a 10-year Treasury bill. A 30-year bill, which normally it was closer to 3.25%. At the end of the market today, we're looking at 1%. People are willing to take 1% to lend to the federal government money for 30 years at a 1% rate of return. So, and those are the benchmarks that we use in the investment returns that we get from where we place the money. So we expect there's going to be a substantial reduction in interest income if the trend that is going on now continues.
So at the minimum, we are looking to reduce 1.4. And the way we want to do it, we would like to do it through level 1 and level 2 reductions. What do they mean? Level 1 is reduction in the budget that does not affect teacher and learning. So efficiencies, low-hanging fruit, and Rafael in a second is going to talk about few obvious ones because there was some development with transportation services. Also level 2, which will affect teaching and learning, but in indirect way, not direct, indirect way. That's level 3, which is not being contemplated at this time. Rafael, do you want to chime in about
So, thank you. So the basic categories that we looked at as an opportunity for us to be able to arrive at that $1.4 million. One is transportation. When we came before the board during the last finance committee meeting, we were looking at an increase of $1 million. From this year, amount that we pay for transportation, bus transportation, next year was going to be $1 million. We're still actually in the process of negotiating. But so far, we've been able to reduce the increase from $1 million to $500,000. And what they were also talking about, they, meaning the vendor, was looking at CPI of 5% each year. In addition to the $1 million increase, we've been able to negotiate that to CPI plus no more than 1.5% increase. So we're trending in the right way. So with that being said, we're looking at least a minimum savings of $500,000 that goes towards that. Another thing that we're thinking about is we looked at a couple of opportunity to get some efficiency in central office support position. And with that, we should be able to look at getting about $100,000 in savings, and if we go through with that. And the same thing with early childhood. We've been analyzing all the early learning programs that we have in the district and see if there's a way we can do it better and still be able to do it without having to spend as much money as we do right now. The opportunities that we think exist with that, if we were able to follow through with the ideas that we have in mind as to those opportunities, we look at saving about another $250,000 in that. And then I think we talked to the board about Camp Timberley, that the last 3 years, we've subsidized our camp by $300,000 over 3 years. If we decide one of two things, if we decide to make sure the camp actually pays for itself, we charge the actual cost of putting up that camp, or we go to a different camp, maybe it's a one-day camp or a camp that is less expensive. That's a savings in 1 year of $70,000. Another thing that we looked at doing is reduce the consulting budget, which we've heard from we've heard from our fellow educators who have talked to us repeatedly about that, and board members who have also communicated with us about the need to really look at consulting budget and see there's a way we can provide some of the services that we now consult for outside using the expertise of the folks in the district in doing that. Doing that, we look at the possibility of saving $150,000. And we also talked about the fact that the enrollment in the district is relatively flat. And the immediate enrollment for next year is looking like we won't see an increase the way it looks right now. We know there's a possibility there could be an increase once we get closer to the start of the school year. But what we know right now, if the projection is good and we can slightly increase class size, we're not talking about anything substantial, because we have some classroom with as little as 15, 16 students. If we can add more students to that, we look at maybe saving another $120,000 as far as reduction of the personnel that we need. And then we talked about reducing supply cost. The cost of textbook adoption, maybe looking at doing it differently than what we've done so far. That gives us an opportunity of also saving $100,000. And there's a position in the Building and Grounds Department that is paid for out of capital funds right now. There's an individual that is retiring. We are thinking we'll be able to function without replacing that position. That gives us a possibility of another $100,000 in savings there. And we've also listened to the feedback we've gotten during negotiation and from board members about out-of-state travel, trying to make sure that we limit as much as possible the expenses related to folks going out to get PD, and see those PDs can take place here, having folks come here and provide the PD to us, or find a comparable PD here in the district. That provides us an opportunity of saving minimally $50,000. So if you add up all those numbers that we estimated, that's how we got up to $1.4 million. So the charge that you gave us, we've taken it very seriously. We're thinking about it because we know that looking forward, we have to start doing something now to extend as much as possible the doomsday that's reflected in our financial projections.
I had a question regarding the early childhood piece and how you'd see efficiencies there. I just want to point out that the State Board of Education is really looking into how school districts and programs are utilizing the early childhood block grant and making sure that they're using every dollar and it goes to quality improvements, right? And really goes to the child and servicing children in early childhood programs. I know we've had issues, I think, with Prevention Initiative where there was some money that was left out, right? That we didn't use, and for some reason I think it just wasn't used. So as a matter of fact, there's currently an RFP out there for school. So if school districts want to increase slots, for instance, there's that money out there, and I think the deadline is going to be, I believe, March 20th. I get in about 2 weeks. So again, I'm a firm believer in really investing in early childhood as a means or as a strategy to help close the opportunity gap. So as we look at, I know you suggested that we look at efficiencies within our early childhood programs. Really, again, if there's opportunities to really augment the quality of the program, I'd say let's go for it. And but if you get a little more explanation as to what efficiencies you see specifically that we can have in the early childhood program, that'd be really great.
Thank you. There are certain functions we haven't gotten granular yet, but there are certain functions that we provide in the district generally that is also provided downstairs, that we feel if we can figure out a way to merge those functions, and we can still provide those functions, there will be no diminution in services that are provided to our children and our family, but it will result in savings because of the scale that we can have up here instead of it being done down here.
So just to clarify, those are non-program.
Those are non-program, those are operational back-end services that are being provided.
So the potential for changes in early childhood is triggered concern for me as well, because of, I think, the important role that early childhood plays in us actually having an impact on the opportunity gap and the powerful opportunity that we have as a district to have early childhood resources that are within our system that we can have direct impact on the alignment of. And so the question that comes to mind for me as you're listing all of these efficiencies is, it's always wonderful to hear about more money, because we hear plenty about the money that we do not have. But also, there's a number of times where we've talked about having this conversation as a community with stakeholder engagement, and some of these are things we've already talked about, other things are new. And I think before we settle in and say, this is what we're going to do, we need to find a way to get some stakeholder input on the direction that we're going. And when we were in the midst of the previous referendum campaign, there was a very, very difficult conversation that we had about reduction in force. And what we heard back from the community about that was that they were caught off guard by the notice, and that if they had the notice, educators and community members, that they would have loved to help us solve the problem. And they proposed some different solutions. And so I would like to, given that we have some time, right, there's urgency that we're operating with, but we also have some time, I would like to consider what are the ways that we can involve stakeholders in helping us solve some of these problems, if we can.
We totally agree with you. We recognize that sometimes, a lot of times really, the users of the services and the programs that we provide have a perspective that we don't. They have ideas that will help shape some of the thinkings that we have. So we agree, and we think it would be a wonderful idea to include stakeholders' voices in shaping the ideas that we're pursuing. What we're presenting today are just the first pass that comes to us. We are not committed to doing this, definitely. We're just going to bring the idea forward, and we're open to whatever input and feedback that we get to arrive at a firm number. Thank you.
I agree, Anya, that I think the how in these conversations really matters. And I think this first pass, it's like almost $1.5 million. It still impacts people, right? But you also said, this, you were alluding to doomsday, not a matter of if, but when. And the actual gap in our budget is closer to $10 million. And this is, we have, our last ask was, what do we have to do to stop the problem from getting bigger? And this is the answer. And I think it's, it's important for us to at least think about that part too. And I don't want to avoid what you asked for, which is like, how do we engage people in these conversations? And I think the more we have these conversations, the more we're going to be validated by, there's lots of great people doing lots of great work here, and nobody wants to lose the relationships or people that do important work. And I think one of our heaviest tasks is, how do we do this in a way that impacts kids the least? And I think your criteria here, which, did you explain what level 1 and 2 are?
Yes.
right? Like these are efficiencies, these aren't loss of opportunity. I am concerned about anytime class size comes up. You know, every teacher's ears just perked up. Because on paper, you see a class of 14, but that doesn't mean you can always like just add 5 kids from somewhere, right? That's not how sectioning in neighborhood schools
And I
work.
don't think we're talking about increase, we're just talking about getting the classrooms up to the guidelines, current guidelines, because right now we have a lot of classrooms, you know, well below that guidelines.
So one of my questions or pushbacks about that probably takes more digging with RAD is, you know, how many classrooms are below the guidelines as a result of people who have requested to go to schools that are not their home school, or, you know, different types of permissive transfers. We've heard about the crowding at Nichols. You know, how do we quantify that problem, and then by undoing that a little bit to mitigate the class size issue, to what degree are we now, you know, changing people's opportunity or what they're seeking for their kids, right? And again, that's a conversation for community members. We know who these people are, who might be impacted. Once you kind of discern what group that impacts, how do you reach out to them and say, you know, if we were to make this shift, how might that have impacted your life, to get a sense for the pain or the purpose?
I totally agree with you, because we are just trying to be creative.
Right, I appreciate that.
At the end of the day, we recognize implicitly that the achievement of student and the learning of student is what guides everything we do. We're not a bank, we're not a business. So we always make sure that before we make decision, the achievement of student is paramount in our thinking. So we are just bringing ideas, and I recognize what you're saying. Before we will say, let's make a recommendation as to what we move forward on, we want to make sure that student achievement is not negatively impacted with any of the decisions that we make.
So is this list of ideas for us to discuss tonight, are these potential for next year? Or are these for us to discuss right now as a purpose of both being open and transparent, but also to kind of get a sense for where we as a board sits on this kind of decision?
And I also just want to, I think you mentioned this, but I just want to clarify, the 1.4 million that you're talking about, that's obviously not to eliminate the structural deficit. That's just, the charge that we gave was what is the amount to not have it grow with the upcoming budget. So that's what we would need to look at for the 2021 budget to reduce from the current year's budget.
So you gave us the number and about what that looks like.
So then that's, you know, now that we know what that looks like, then we can now engage in the conversations about, is that still the priority? And that we would want to consider all of these cuts, or is there something in between? And I would just echo the concerns that were raised about early childhood, and the classroom sizes definitely, you know, made my ears perk up, and I think we have to make sure we engage the early childhood director and educators in any, you know, consolidation of operation, even if it is operational, I think just to make sure that everybody is, feels on board with that. And I appreciate the saying that, you know, there are some class sizes that are 14, 15. I think we've seen this year over year, but it's not quite as simple as saying we'll just increase those sizes. So I think we just need to make sure we're engaging the school leaders and educators in those decisions if we are talking about making the kind of changes that are going to impact that. And then we can better decide whether that is a reduction that we want to make. I guess the other one too that raised, just, you know, made me perk up because it's such a recent decision, and I know there's been some community discussion around it, is around Camp Timberley. I think we all agree that there needs to be some change made with that program to reduce the costs for us, whether that is raising the fees again, because again, I think there's been some misinformation that's gone out that the increase that we proposed and implemented, first of all, that was the full cost of the program, which it is not. It still is subsidized by the district, and that it was somehow to compensate for past deficits with the program, which is also not true. That's actually what the cost for this year is. So it isn't about reducing any past deficits. And it also was really to try to make sure that we could implement a sliding scale so that families on free or reduced lunch could have, which is not something that we had done in the past. So just to try to clarify some of those misconceptions, I think is important. But then also to think about moving forward, engaging community members on, is Camp Timberley really the program that we want to go with? And if we do we want to, will families absorb the actual full cost of that? Or, what are the other programs that we can look into, and how important is that opportunity moving forward? So those are the ones that red flags. I don't know if you had other ones that you wanted to.
Yeah, I guess, and some of this is certainly not for tonight, but I do have some questions. I really would like to know the number of our total number. Line item for consultants. So I know you talked about how much it might be reduced by, but I'm curious as to what it is for 2019, for the 2019-20 school year. You talked about out-of-state travel. I'm curious as to what that line item has been over the last 3 years. It's hard to tell what a raw number is of reducing it by 50,000 without knowing what the total was. I would say that there's been a lot of work with the Cradle to Career, and I know we've been doing a big push. We just had a fabulous presentation from Erickson Institute just the other week, where many agencies and the district partnered together. So I really would encourage us to think strongly about the impact and the message that that sends then in our partnership if we are looking around, or how we look at that, or whatever we're looking at, what is then the impact on our partnership with our community organization and what we're doing within the Cradle to Career. So to me, it's a bigger, not just our programs, but the impact fully. I would also say that I know we're looking at the potential efficiency. You said retiring and building maintenance, and that it was about $100,000 coming out of a particular, sorry, I missed whatever that line item. Capital fund. Yeah. Just a reminder that many of our buildings are very old. Very old. And so that I know that we've been doing a lot of work to keep those buildings up and running and functioning and health and safety for our students. And so I just want to be mindful that if we are looking at efficiencies, we are also keeping in mind that we have very old buildings that we also need to keep functioning, and we've added to our building square footage as our student population has grown. So I just want to be mindful that we are not creating a separate problem by also thinking about efficiencies, right? So I just need to note that we want to also create health, maintain our healthy, safe environments for students, families, and our staff, while also looking at all of the areas of capacity. And again, I would just, like Anya said, encourage us as we move through this process to continue to reach out, that there are many people that would be happy to problem solve, think out of the box, be creative along with you, as long as we ask for their voice to be a part of the table.
And I appreciate the feedback, and I just wanted to specifically address the issue you raised about the position, the maintenance position funded out of capital. If you remember the last 2 years, we've actually added 2 additional service people in maintenance because of the recognition of the need to upgrade our buildings, if you will. We added a general maintenance person, and we also added an HVAC person, which we did now. We used to contract those out, so we recognize that. So the thinking behind, even though we haven't fully fleshed this out, the thinking behind possibly not filling that position will be at the very least, some of that money can be used to provide service to the building as opposed to supervision. So I just wanted to point that out.
And thank you for doing that and adding that, because it certainly does provide a support for our buildings. I just also want to be mindful that sometimes it's easy to look at a raw number and not always know the unintended consequence that might happen. So I'm just saying that, and let's keep that in mind and just really think about how that might impact continuing the maintenance of our older buildings. That's all.
So some of that dovetails really well with the fact that Dr. Horton's here, and we have kind of put our strategic plan development or the next one on hold until he's officially here. But that will obviously have a long-term financial plan that has a parallel long-term facilities hope and dream, as well as an accountability feature as well. And so those are great questions that are part of a multi-year venture to try to right the ship a little bit and tend to all those things that take some big thinking, and everyone's going to have to be involved in that in some way.
And I think just to add to Meg's point in terms of our operations and workforce, at the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned COVID-19. So that's another consideration that I think, unfortunately, going forward, we have to consider the cost of something like this and the toll that it would have on operations and the need to maintain buildings and sanitation in regards to the workforce that would be required to do that. But also, if for whatever reason we would have to have an unexpected workforce that's required to be out, and that includes our deck members, but it also I think includes our other partners. So I think it's not something that we want to talk about, but I think it's something very important to consider moving forward. So in addition, if it's nice that we have that money to save, but we also have new considerations that need to be made in light of COVID-19.
Thank you.
Sure. I think your conversation about Timberley illuminates your point about stakeholder input. I think while there was a lot of misinformation, and I think our decision-making was very sound, the timeline, I think, could have been better. I think that a lot of the reaction that we're seeing about the fees increasing is that people, as someone who has a fifth grader, it was pretty late in the game for that to be changed. And so just really anticipating how we can better communicate and better include folks in the process. I also want to reiterate that I think the trends and research is there that we need to be investing more in early childhood. And so we want to be mindful of what kind of cuts that is and what other, increases we probably need to consider. I know we're not talking increases right now, but that's a clear indicator that that's a place where we need more investment. And I do want to just briefly be the lone voice for consultants for a second. I recognize that there are probably spaces where we use consultants that can be reduced, but often when we're using consultants, it's because we do not have staff that has the expertise necessary to do the work. And when we're looking at that as a straight comparison, having an employee with insurance and benefits and, all of those things, it is cost effective to use consultants when we do not have staff that can cover those things. And so I would hope that we wouldn't just hatchet job the consultant budget, that we'd really thoughtfully consider where we can institutionalize those things and use the folks that we have, and where we really do need the expertise from outside folks.
Thank you. We hear you.
In terms of board action, what's aside from, this is a discussion item, so what kind of action or timeline can we expect moving forward in terms of some of these recommendations?
It's a great question. The question came up before, is this all for next year? No, it's not. Tonight, our goal was that we stayed at the beginning just to launch the conversation. I think use the word, was it starting block or something like that? First path. Yeah, right. And what we want to do now is to look at getting stakeholders' input. I think Raphael named it very well. The people who are working in the trenches have great ideas that we need to be aware of, and also with our community as well, as far as getting feedback from them too. With that is very, very important to do that. At the May meeting, we're to come back with getting feedback from our stakeholders, not to have a final plan, but at least a plan, because the $1.4 million that the board directed us to do somewhat short-term. It's not the long-term solution. As we said, the deficit is much more than 1.4, but time is moving on and we need to start to work in that area. It may very well be, I'm just going to use class size as an example. We might not even look at class size. We're just putting that in there as a qualifier for that. In that class size is very complex, in that it's not a mathematical formula where you look at there's X number of kids and here it is, because you have to look at what other needs the students have, which is important with that. And many times it depends on the number of sections that you have in a school that it doesn't mathematically work out that way. A good example is the sixth grade at Nichols, which has been a problem last year. This year's not quite as much. Next year will be okay, but the year after, that's on our radar screen. We know that's going to be an issue. We can't be blind to that. We have to look at that as well. So we'll be coming back at the May meeting with more specifics on it, but still not the plan, but really working toward that. And as Andalib said, he's still working with the area, like in transportation, of what are other efficiencies, for example, within transportation that we may be able to come up with. But I'd like to really commend Raphael and the work he's done in the area of transportation, of taking that from $1 million and now we're down to about $500,000. But we still think, and that's really just through negotiations, hard-line negotiations. Now we can look at, are there other efficiencies that we can put in there that may help us to even drop that down further, not just maybe next year, but the year 1, year 2, and year 3. I just use that as an example that doesn't have a direct impact on the classroom as we looked at our levels 1, 2, and 3. That's kind of a long-winded response, Joey, but that's what we'd look at
May.
coming back next time is the May meeting. Yeah.
So the May meeting, we'll see more fine-tuned recommendations and we'll have a better idea. We'll get an update on how stakeholder input was
Exactly.
Received for that. I just want to also give my thanks to Raphael and Kathy. I think we've kind of been wanting to have this discussion for some time because we've known that we are at the point where we need to make some of these bigger decisions. And so this is really incredibly helpful. It's helpful to have that number and also the context of sort of the different categories and the levels and all of that. This is a great starter conversation, and it really does give us some idea of the thought process and how we need to at least start it to move forward. It's very helpful to me, so I thank you for putting this together for us.
And I would just say I'm very impressed with the level of knowledge that both Kathy and Raphael had. We were talking about consultants today and looking at drilling down, because you can't just look at it from the big bucket. You have to look at it, slicing that down. And they have the data there that they're still working on, but they're really having it down so we can really make well-informed decisions. I'm just using consultant as an example of how we can do that. So thank you for all the great work you're doing.
Thank you, sir.
So, thank you. I also have another request for in May when we reapproach this conversation. Can y'all bring the racial equity impact assessment tool evaluation to it? And I think that would be particularly useful for the entire discussion, but also I'm thinking about early childhood and the stakeholder discussion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Point well made.
Thank you.
And thank y'all for what you've done so far.
All right, so the next meeting of the Finance Committee will be on May 4th, 2020. Without any more items, we will adjourn at now, 8:27.
And we will